Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, San Francisco's premier author interview program. And today joining us is Christopher Reich, and he's going to talk about his new book, Rules of Deception. I guess we can call it a spy novel, and it's published by Doubleday. Welcome back, Chris. Nice to have you on the show again.
Jim, it's great to be here. Thank you.
It was some years ago, and my wife dug it out of the library fixture that we have in our living room last night when we did the first billion.
I think that was back in 2002, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it was, because when you signed the book, that's what you put, 02.
It was at the right when the whole .com world was melting down.
That's correct. And that was a novel of great financial intrigue, and Rules of Deception kind of goes beyond that in the sense that it deals in international intrigue on a large scale. And the book went on sale on July the 15th, and as of right now, it's number 3 on the New York Times Book Review bestseller list. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's a great feeling. It's good to be back that high on the list.
Yeah. And the thumbnail note that the book review has in the bestseller section says, "The death of a surgeon's wife draws him into a world of espionage and intrigue." So let's start with the good doctor. His name is Jonathan Ransom.
Yes.
And tell us about him. He's involved with Doctors Without Borders.
Yes, Dr. Jonathan Ransom is a surgeon and has been for 8 years working for Doctors Without Borders, the international aid organization that works really in the world's kind of hot spots, perilous areas where no one else dares venture to give, poor people the medical care they so desperately need. And he's really based his life on helping other people. And with him is his beautiful wife, his beautiful English wife, Emma, and they toil side by side in these areas bringing medical care.
One of the interesting background aspects of the good doctor is that at one time in his life, when he was younger, he needed to have thrills. He needed to have thrills of speed. He needed to have the thrills involved with having fights with people. And somehow he turned his life around and said, I am now going to find that fulfillment, that adrenaline rush in helping others. Well,
you said it. He was an adrenaline junkie. He wasn't much of a student growing up. He found his thrills and his kind of life experience, on the steep faces of mountains around the world. And he had a transformative experience helping save a life in a traffic accident that made him redirect his efforts into something much more productive than getting into fist fights and seeing, how far he could hang it out on the wind on a vertical face in the Himalayas. And that was in studying medicine and becoming a doctor, because, as he says, there's no greater rush than saving a life.
He's pushed by circumstances back into that former kind of life, in a way, I think.
Well, the book opens up with Jonathan and his wife, Emma, on the face of a mountain in Switzerland enjoying a much-needed vacation. When disaster strikes, they're caught in a big storm, and to get off the mountain, they have to negotiate quite a steep slope, and Emma, unfortunately, falls to her death. And so Jonathan, then he gets back to his hotel, and he could barely start mourning when he starts getting clues that Emma was not exactly the wife and close companion that he had thought for all these years. In fact, she might be involved in a lot more, let's say, nefarious activities. And so for him to discover if she really loved him, he has to get to the heart of this conspiracy at which she was at the center.
This then puts him into a lot of different things. It's intrigue on top of intrigue, and it involves the United States. It involves Israel. It involves Iran and the confrontation among these nations over nuclear weapons. The doctor is far from home, so to speak.
He is. It's kind of a story where opening one door leads to another, and unfortunately the hallway gets narrower and darker and more dangerous as he goes along. It was so fun to explore first the topic of kind of the old-fashioned Hitchcock hero of a good man who was all of a sudden thrust into a situation where he's attacked at all sides and has no idea really what's going on, So to save himself, he just has to plow forward and ends up actually being the one that either solves the crime or, in this case, like I said, gets to the bottom of this international conspiracy.
Reading this book is, in some sense, scary because the things that are involved here are things that sound like they are happening or could happen tomorrow. And that's, I guess, based on your research and the fact that you know somebody like General Tommy Franks.
Exactly. I got the idea for this book about 4 years ago when I was writing a pilot for a TV show called The Diplomat.
Uh-huh.
And General Franks was one of our consultants. And first I have to say that he's one of the greatest Americans I've ever met, and I have nothing but incredible respect and admiration for him. But he was talking about this class of soldier that works for him that he referred to simply as his operators.
Oh, hold on a minute there, because we have to take a break.
All right.
They're calling Rules of Deception one of the best thrillers ever. Even its backstory is great. Just stay tuned. We just started to hear about it.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
Rules of Deception is the title. We call it a spy novel. The author is Christopher Reich, and it's published by Doubleday. Now, a very interesting person by the name of Liz Smith had a lot to say about this book, and I want to share some of it with you. It's terrible to have to admit, she writes, you're an addict, but here goes. I know I should be spending the summer reading Jane Austen, or I should go on with the latest version of War and Peace, which I find daunting. But an addict is an addict, and I just want to warn you that in July comes Christopher Reich's Rules of Deception. This is one of the best thrillers I've ever read. Writer Reich is the best-selling guy who wrote Number to Count. He won the International Writers Award for the best novel in 2006, and I expect he might be up again for this prize with his latest. I don't want to give away anything here, but the mise-en-scène is mostly Switzerland, and the plot affects the fate of the world when it comes to Iran. So, talk about being au courant. Yes, it's all about nuclear capabilities and a bulletproof, I love this, bulletproof Mercedes, my favorite item in the plot, is one of the stars of this tale. I just want you other thriller addicts to be on the alert for this one and to let you know you have something to look forward to. Liz Smith. And as I recall, you ran into her someplace shortly thereafter?
It was just by, talk about coincidence, I was in New York to take part of this International Thriller Awards, and the night before the big dinner, my wife and I were having supper at Mr. Chow in New York, in Manhattan, and who should be sitting at the table next to us but Liz Smith.
Oh, my gosh.
And so
That's unbelievable.
And I waited till the end of dinner, and I went up and I said, I want to thank you for your kind words. And she just melted and just went on gushing about the book. She was just all too kind, I'll tell you.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Finish up your thoughts about the general, please.
Well, I've been working on this pilot with General Franks, and he was talking about this class of soldiers that he called his operators, which were, the most highly trained troops that worked under his command, and they were involved in, the blackest of black ops, clandestine missions conducted behind enemy lines. And I just got to thinking, my goodness, what would happen if you were married to one of these people? They certainly couldn't tell you what they're doing when they go off on their travels. And then I turned it around and said, what would happen if it was a woman? And so that was really the impetus for what became Rules of Deception.
And Rules of Deception is a book that it's almost like having to catch the train while it's moving. I mean, it opens so fast. The incidents come at us one after the other. And Jonathan Ransom, though, is a really great doctor, I think. And one of the places you described him in a kind of a thumbnail way, I marked in the book. He says, too many of the surgical residents at Sloan Kettering had dreamed aloud about their Park Avenue practices and houses in the Hamptons. They could have their baubles and bangles. God knew they'd worked hard enough to get them. It was just that to him, medicine was not a means to an end. Medicine was the end itself. He refused to be defined in any way by his possessions, by cars like this, speaking of the Mercedes. It was actions that mattered. Dr. Jonathan Ransom took care of others. That's certainly a wonderful description of a great doctor.
Well, that's really the core of the character and why he's such a great guy to write about, because he's someone that has put others in front of himself, and there's just no question for him what his life is all about, why he's been put here on earth, and it is to help other people. And then, of course, he's placed in the position as the book goes on where he may have to harm others or to see others harmed in order to prevent even more from being harmed. So it's the classic kind of conundrum that you put a hero into, and that is how much bad can he be allowed, or he can allow to have happen, to make sure that actually good triumphs.
And you make him have to deal with people like the Ghost. I mean, and the Ghost is he had uses for individuals whose consciences had been scrubbed clean. This is his boss, clean of artifice, especially a man who by appearance and education possessed all the qualities of a gentleman. Such a man would be able to move in the highest circles of society. He would be granted access to the most rarefied gatherings. In short, the Ghost was the perfect assassin. And that's what you make the doctor deal with.
Well,
you're terrible.
The one thing I want to point out is, even in this book where you read about assassins and international conspiracies, all of it is really based on fact. And so in reality, there are actually, of course, assassins that work for governments. And I tried to ground this description of an assassin, the Ghost, in as much reality as possible, and paint him as a human being that has been trained simply as his job to kill others, and to kill them efficiently and cleanly and without getting caught. And that's what makes him all the more frightening.
Well, rumors as well as praise now surround rules of deception. We're going to look at some of them when we come back.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
This is Jim Foster. It is Conversations on the Coast. Our book today is Rules of Deception by Christopher Reich. It's a spy novel. It is a novel that you cannot put down. It is a novel that everybody in this spy thriller business loves, like James Patterson. Christopher Reich, he writes, is one of my favorite suspense writers, and he's outdone himself this time. From the ingenious opening, featuring a butterfly of all things, to the mind-blowing switcheroo ending, this is a book and a movie, all in one. Are there movie rumors out there, Christopher?
There are. The movie's going, we're developing full steam ahead. It was optioned by Paramount Pictures, the movie producer Lorenzo di Bonaventura, who's their kind of big gun on the lot, the producer of The Matrix, of Transformers, really just a fantastic executive. So the script is being written, and I know in April he had a meeting with Brad Pitt to come in there and talk about the film. So Brad Pitt would certainly do the role justice.
Yes, he would, and would make the film wow.
He would be great. It would be just fantastic, I think, for him and for the story too.
The other rumor out there is something that the publisher calls the franchise. We've reinvented the Reich brand with this book. The proof is in the New York Times list. Chris has which genres, from financial thrillers to global espionage. The reviewers in People, Entertainment Weekly, and the Washington Post call him the next Robert Ludlum, and his hero, Dr. Jonathan Ransom, gives Bourne a run for the money. We've signed Chris to a 2-book deal. And no dummies at Doubleday. And the sequel, Rules of Vengeance, pubs next summer. Is this all true?
This is all true. I didn't at first foresee this to be a series, but it was halfway through the book when I really fell in love with these characters and kind of their shifting allegiances and shifting positions with respect to one another. Jonathan and his wife Emma, especially Emma, she's such the great heroine for the 21st century. Just supremely capable woman. So the second book is Rules of Vengeance, which I'm just finishing up, and the third, I believe, it will be called Rules of Attack. And we'll go from there.
Wow. And I'm glad that, that this character is coming back, because I like the Doctor a lot. I really
Very
do.
fun to write about, that's for sure.
Steve Berry, the author of the Alexandria Link, brought up some good points, I think. Once again, he says Christopher Reich is firing on all cylinders. Rules of Deception is a supple, elegant thriller with a beguiling sophistication. Reich catches the reader on page 1, oh do you, and utterly commands you to finish through a plot that carries triumphantly from one thrilling climax to another. He certainly knows how to manipulate the reader in exciting ways, and he's an expert, as his award-winning The Patriots Club proved, in creating a riveting, imagined world so real you wonder if it was actually imagined. You know, you do something terrible here. You don't have a plot that just has twists. You know, you have a plot full of switchbacks.
Yeah, that's the fun of it. You never know what is real and what is not false, but what is purposely being deceptive in front of you. You know, hence the title, Rules of Deception. So it's kind of walking across a quicksand pit.
Yeah, and for the most of the time, you don't know who's on what side, or what side is good and what side is bad and what side is in between.
This is the world we live in, where you have constantly shifting loyalties. It's a world where, you know, even as an American, you don't know exactly which is the right path to follow. And Jonathan Ransom has certainly struck or thrust into that position where he has nothing but his own wits, the wits gained from years of experience as a climber and as a doctor, you know, to solve this or to get to the bottom of this huge conspiracy, which, as you said, leads him into the heart of the problems that are taking place in the Middle East right now.
One of the things that you said you wanted to share with us was a letter you received from someone you call an unexpected reader.
Well, Jim, this was one of the great thrills of my life. 3 days ago, I received a large envelope in the mailbox. It was a very simple return address, the White House, Washington, D.C.
Wow.
I opened it up, and there, on a single page of buff stationery with the picture of the White House embossed in gold, handwritten in blue felt tip marker, was a letter that reads, "Dear Christopher, I just finished Rules of Deception and liked it. The story was interesting and the action was fast-paced. Keep writing. You're on a roll. George Bush."
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
Can you imagine?
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was just a big thrill to think that the President of the United States, you know, the most powerful politician certainly in the world, is reading your book is certainly something that makes you go write the next book as well as you can.
Wow, I'll say. Yet another plot twist for Rules of Deception, now endorsed by the President of the United States.
And that was very nice of him.
Well, no matter what your political persuasions might be, Rules of Deception is the book for you. We used to talk about this kind of book as summer reading. This one is more than that. Rules of Deception by Christopher Reich. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.